All right, now we scan Shodzi'dzo. Just going to do a part two, add on a little bit more explanation on future repetitive, and then we'll do the optative repetitive as well. But before we go, I just want to point out, this was the slide I finished on right here last time, and there was a mistake in here. Instead of that, it should be, because that one, if you're going to use ga, ga would be the it form. So, but you're trying to use the me form in that. So that me form has two. You can either use a K. Well, that's usually what people prefer to use. And then you can also use a G. A couple people have used this in resources. Also just the start of the root. Normally the rules would dictate that you use a G. But it's not uncommon to hear elders, speakers use a K when they use this, whether they use this one, it's a translocative and it has an automatic repetitive, but even when it's future, they've used a K at times too. So most people prefer a K, but it's not out of the question to see a G too. But that's what it should be, not what I had in that last slide. So just for clarification. Okay, so when you're doing these, you kind of got to separate what you're doing there, because these ones kind of have their own little sets of rules. If you're going to do past tense or factual, like I said, well, this is the easiest version to do, because all you got to worry about when you're doing factual and past tense, or whichever one you want to call it, you really just got to worry about sa and say. And then you just got to know where the sa and say go when you have red prefixes and when you have blue prefixes. But that's all you got to work with, is just these two options. It's not like the other ones where you have all these other options and you got to kind of know the rules a little bit. You just got to know two. And then it's even easier if you do the purple prefixes, the people to people ones, because then you just use, for past tense repetitive, you just use sa for everything. You don't even have to worry about a say. There's no rules for say. Now those purples are just all sa. And then plug in your purple free prefix, blend it if you have to, if it starts with a H. Again, for past tense. And then the same thing, when you do these two, if you got to do a duplicative, past tense, repetitive, same thing. You only got to worry about dosa and dose. If it's a translocative or hey verb, past tense, repetitive, then that's all you got to worry about, hosa, hose. If it's a past tense, repetitive, partitive, that's all you got to worry about is nosa, nose. So the past tense version is really easy. I mean, for the most part. You just know you only got to worry really about sa and say. That's it. That's all you got to worry about. Now, for these ones, right, when you got to decide between using G, Z, or J, a T, and an S, that's 1, 2, 3. That's 4 different options you got to use. So these are what you would use when you just conjugate a regular stative version, no future. Just a regular stative, right? And a regular habitual. You're going to follow these rules, right? So again, G, you got to know, same thing when we do up here, right? Where sa and say is. You got to know where those go for red and blue. That's the same thing for G. That goes in all the places you would put say, right? For the reds, and it's slightly different for the blues. Recognizing all the ones that start with a Y, so that means you know where all the hidden Y's are too. You switch all those to DZs. If you want, like I said, use a J, but also the J gets used for translocative. TY also turns into a J. But I'll reiterate, it's not wrong to see a J for a repetitive. T, really, that's just red S, but also this is mostly if you're doing future tense, habitual or stative of purple prefixes that start with the letter S, then yeah, see, if you're doing a stative, a habitual, future, and optative, then you're still going to use this T for even purples that start with S. But purples that are past tense, repetitive, you just use sa for all of those. All right. And then you just get whatever's left. and we'll just go through it. I mean, if you do this enough times and you do some practice conjugations with these, I think you'll start to get it pretty quick. All right. So, optative repetitive. Could, should, might, again. All right. So, I know some people call it a hypothetical. Some people call it a would, could, and shoulder. But that's, so we're going to use this one one of the examples I taught it or showed at the end was awasis, which is to renew. So this word always has a repetitive on it. So, but we're going to use the optative version. So we're going to go with the optative. We're going to go with these ones here. So optative past first, I guess. Yeah. So we're going to go with that first. Onsa, onse. All right. So let's go with this real quick. And this is the punctual ending here, awasis. So basically, this one's pretty easy because you're just using those. So if we figure out, like, okay, let's start with onse first, right? So for red prefixes, it's the inclusives, which is HNY, DW, and the second person plurals, snya and swa. This is one where I messed up making this. I didn't want to edit this for all the slides all over again. So this Y should also be red. And it's just going to be messed up like through the whole thing. But just know that that's there. That should always be red as you keep going through the slides. Like it might stick out like a sore thumb to you, but that part should be red. All right. So when we talk about onse, it's just these ones again right here. We talked about these, right? So let's do that. It's going to be these ones here. That's the ones we got to worry about for onse. Let's switch it here. I don't know why I said optative past. It's optative. All right. So onse, 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 onse nyawasis, onse dwadasis, onse dwawasis, onse snyawasis, onse swawasis. All right. So these ones just plug right in. Like I said, in our class we call this gaosego, and we say it's in the box because I'll usually draw a little box around it for the red prefixes and say this is the box for the red prefixes. All right. So now, I made a little note too, like gya. Sometimes people, instead of gya here, they'll use knya, and sometimes instead of yagya, they'll use yaknya. Those are both correct as well. These are just like another way to say it. It's hard to pinpoint which speaking communities use this because I've heard people in all the communities go between both of these and both of these. So, but just be aware that you'll see both and they're not wrong. So those are here and here. Okay, so now when we focus on like onsa, well, I talk about like plug and play because even when we did onse, we just put it in there and then hnya stayed. We plugged this in, snya stayed, dwa stayed, and swa stayed. So, you just plug and play. So when we do onsa, all the ones that aren't here, we got onsa gawases, onsa sawases, onsa yowases, onsa wawases. And then we got onsa gyawases, onsa yagyawases, onsa wanowases, and onsa yagwawases. All right. So you really just plug them in. Like that's what's kind of easy about these onsa and ose. You just plug them in. But I mentioned, like, for the most part, it's these ones that start with H's. Even this here, and I'll talk about this. Like that's really HY. They're a little bit different. So that's going to be those ones, right? So it's going to be onsa wases, onsa yawases, osaino wases. All right. And then I kind of broke down like what happens here, like onsa and then the ha. Even though the H is the pronoun and the A is from the root, you just have this combination in a row. So Onsa plus ha is going to be onsa. All right, and then in the middle here, like I said, this is really a H-Y-A. So onsa plus the ya for two. Again, that's the pronoun, and that's actually part of the root. Onsa ya. All right, and then onsa and heno. Even though the pronoun is really just hen on an A stem, it always turns into nasal O, so I just call it a heno. So that becomes onsaino. All right, so those are what those become as you go through. And then there's the whole thing all over again. So, so there, like, you're done, really. All you got to remember is just like, where do you put your onse, and then where do you put all your onsas, and then how does the onsa blend in with these H's right here. The more you do it, the easier it'll get. All right. So attention to detail, you do want to know, like, we've done this before, or we kind of talked about this earlier, was donsa and dose is a day verb or duplicative, repetitive past tense. All right. And these are quick. Donsa, dose. All right. But when you do this one, donsa and donse, when you put that lengthen in there, now you're putting a duplicative or a day verb optative. Right? It's like onsa and onse, but it's got the D on there now because it's a day verb. All right. So you do want to make sure, like, you know what you're saying if you say donsa, and when you say donsa and donsa. All right. Dose, donse. Those are different. Same thing here, right? If it's a hey verb or translocative, honsa, honse. But then if you lengthen those, honsa and honse, now you got the hey verb with the optative, repetitive. So again, it will change the meaning whether you lengthen it or don't lengthen these. Just attention to detail. That's what you want out of those. So let's do some future tense. So we're still going to use awases because that's a punctual root to renew. It's an A stem. Again, so when it comes to future tense, now you want to know your rules for when you use G, when you use DZ, when do you use a T, when do you use a S, all right? So again, we'll go over again, inclusive, second person plural. We talked about this right there, that box right there, all right? DZs, if it starts with a Y, all right? Right here, right here, right here. These, like, even though this has a punctual, I just put the pronouns on right now. Like, this isn't actually anything right now. I mean, I guess it could be, but we're not going to get into that. I just put the pronouns on to get us started here. And then we're going to start. And then you just put a future. You're going to put a future on there too. You're going to use the future E. All right. So first thing we're going to focus on is where we put G. All right. So it's going to be all these ones, right? And this one's just plug and play. G nya, G snya, G dwa, G swa. All right. And then, but you're going to put the future E on there too. So it's going to be NG, NG, nya, and G, nya, and so forth. So let's make the change. Boom. All right. You and I will renew. You two will renew. We all will renew. You all will renew. All right. You got the future, you got the repetitive, and then you got the conjugation right there. All right. Again, red prefixes, that's where they go. If it was blue prefixes, you would be doing NG with all these ones. All right, but it's red prefixes, so use these ones. Next up, we're going to do, where do you add the DZ? And I kind of touched on this, if it starts with a Y, so we got here, here, and here, right? So now you're going to still have your future tense, but you're going to do z, ends. So remember, when a nasal E bumps into a D, you don't want to say eds, like Ed's Tavern, like some guy named Ed, and you're saying that's Ed's. You don't want to say that. It's a nasal E. So that's the thing about these nasal vowels, is they make an N sound when they're next to a consonant. Except for when they're next to like a H or a S. But otherwise, like a D, a T, a K, you're going to have the letter N sound in there. So this one, ends, ends. All right. So again, right here, you're going to make the changes here. And let's make the changes. Oh, sorry. Also making the point, people might think, well, this one starts with a Y. Just remember again, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, this is a HY, so it's not a true Y like these ones. All right. So back to this. Let's make the change with this. We're gonna change it to ends. Okay, so instead of the yowa seis, enzowa seis. All right, so we got a future, we got a repetitive because it starts with a Y. So again, future starts with a Y instead of yagya. It's enzagya. Enzagya wasis. Oh, enzagya wasis. And then enzagwa wasis. All right, so yagwa and zagwa. So now we got the DZs knocked out. We got the NG and za. We got those knocked out. Now let's go to the ones where you use a T, which if it starts with the S for red. All right. And then you're going to use ents. Ents. Again, nasal bumping into a consonant, so letter N. Ents. So I think I already did this change here. Entsawases. And then we talked about the non-blue, the purples too. Like if you're doing a future purple that starts with the S, then you're going to, same thing, ent. So like if you said like seoi, right? Tell her, you can say entseoi. You'll tell her again. All right. And then again, then you just do all the stuff that's left. So we've already done where G is, where does the T go, and where does the DZ go. So everything else that's left is what we do. And I always leave this for like last. I used to do this first, but it's really like you got to come up with all these different rules for like when to use it. Like this starts with a H, a W, a G, Y, a H, a G. I mean, you can list those off, but I just know like those are the ones that are left. So, and then again, you're going to have future and then S. So you don't have to say a ents. Now you don't have to make the letter N in there. It's just this one you can't say S. All right. The sound S. So I make the change. Eskawases. This one, separate your S and your H. Eshawases. Eskawases. And then I left this alone because I'm going to talk about this in a second. Eswenowases. Eshenowases. So we just put the S in there. Future E with the repetitive S. All right. And we'll mention this one here. So again, this one's a little different because, let's talk about the rule, right? We have a nasal E with a wa. So an plus wa equals won, even if there's a repetitive S in between them. Again, you wouldn't do it for this. This is the whole thing. The swa is like a whole unit, whereas this is like a piece added in between them. So that's why it'll still be the S-swon. All right. And that's what ends up happening here. S-swon-wasis. All right. And is that it? I guess that's it. I thought I put more on here. Best thing to do is like practice. Pick a verb where you know pick an A-stem verb that you know the, the punctual root, and do that. Pick a blue verb. Pick a verb and do the stative version. And just with the stative version, like you're going to use you're going to use these rules for G, for DZ, T, and S. All right. Well, for a blue, you won't even have to worry about this one. But pick some verbs and do some future repetitive, regular habituals, regular statives, and then do your past tense, and then do your optatives as well. So I hope that helps. I tried to go real fast so I wouldn't talk for a half hour this time. But again, hopefully that helps. So joggle, swajago in all your studies, and stick with it. Daniho.